What's up, guys? This is Ray from Apple Valley Astrologer. So today's the 1st of March, 2017, and just because of something I've noticed with like people I know on social media, people I know in my personal life, as well as my own personal, experiences that I had the other day, that is now obviously echoing and happening to people I know. And also, I have a history of looking at suicide charts, death charts, that sort of thing, for like violent events or whatever, and understanding the correlating aspects to that. So I've had friends that have posted, suicide stories, and that's essentially what I started getting a lot of. And then I've even, had to try to intervene with some people I know on social media that are having suicidal ideation. So that's a concern. But another thing that I guess kind of didn't think about and overlooked is a lot of the ideation. The key factor with people being destructive, either to the self or to other people, which I kind of went over that with Mercury and Pisces being involved. Lilith in Sagittarius is the common denominator with all of these events. And then thinking back also, I'm not going to, go into graphic detail, but in my past, the last time that Lilith was in Scorpio and then going into Sagittarius, I was having basically more or less the same kind of themes that are going on now. Disgruntled tiffs or whatever between me and a significant other, to where there was threats of violence that could potentially be life-threatening involved. I'm not going to get into any more details than that. I also had a friend that same year had a similar scenario and went and actually committed murder, killed someone, like a guy that was like seeing his ex or something. And essentially Lilith and Sagittarius yet again was the catalyst for that. Then I thought about it. My video that I did with psychopathy and astrology, I'm well aware, and it didn't even dawn on me, it's something that didn't click. Mutable signs are notorious for being the signature for not only psychopathy but serial killers or murderers. So with Lilith being in Sagittarius, or Lilith being in any kind of mutable sign, would constitute the potentials, depending on the aspects involved, of there being murders involved, or killing lives. So as of the last pretty much since the towards the end of Aquarius season, like the 13th or the 14th of February, there has been excessive amounts, more than usual, I guess, because I know that the suicide rate has been going up. It's been going up since Neptune was in Aquarius, but I mean, seriously. But there's the same kind of demographics, or the same reasons, quote-unquote, that people have been killing themselves. And I have it all over my Facebook wall. I have all the events that I've been tracking. And then now, I did, can't remember what video it's for, it's one of my transit videos I just did, where I was talking about, it was the one that I kind of went over how the eclipse is going to affect in a mundane way, that's right. So it was this week's transit event. How I mentioned that the conjunction between Mars and Venus is going to be in the Sun quadrant, the house of that, meaning that it was going to be a person-on-person kind of attacks or violence. Not just that, but it didn't even dawn on me to think Mars as the man and Venus as the woman, and it being domestic. And when I looked back at my Lilith and Sagittarius video, the moment that Lilith transitioned into Sagittarius, that moment Lilith was in the 4th house, and it was squaring the nodes, and the north node was in the 1st house, and the south node was in the 7th house. So that would signify some sort of disturbance in the home or within family that has to do with the self and others. Self or partnership, marriage, that sort of thing. And oh my gosh, okay, so there's been so many either murder-suicides or just murders of from domestic violence, and or suicides and the speculative cause of said suicide from either notes or a goodbye kind of some sort of hints or something, or talking to people that were close to the victim, is that it's due to family trouble. Some of them have been like divorces and separations. Some of them killed each other, and then some of them apparently were killing each other around on Valentine's Day. But long story short, what I'm getting at is that I tracked every single one of these events. I looked at the aspects involved, and I determined from my own interpretations, from what I know from my past experience, from other charts that I've done in the past for violence or this sort of thing, and suicides as well. And I have the aspects that are responsible for this, and this video is essentially to warn people of how long this is going to last, and that everybody is essentially susceptible to this. And although Lilith in Sagittarius is the catalyst per se of the I don't even know, that's pushing people to kill themselves, the eclipse itself also was like the trigger. So when the solar eclipse happened, obviously the sun was blocked out, so the dark side, quote unquote, of the moon was evident. And I also wrote down some future times where the moon will be conjunct with Lilith. And time out. I'm gonna get my paper and go over those, and then tell you how long this is gonna last, and just to give people a heads up and warn them, I guess, that warn them about either themselves or their spouse or family members. There's obviously going to be, deaths out in public too, because there's been, and more or less when I said that, it was going to be like vehicular or something like that, or negligence. I didn't even, it must have just skipped my mind and missed the whole concept of there being volatile, combative relations. I mean, I said that, but in the home, but to this extent, this is nuts. This is nuts. I've never seen anything like this before. And my guess is that since a lot of this is just time out. I'm overwhelmed. Time out. Okay, sorry. So I had to take a break for a second because I was getting overwhelmed by all the information, and I essentially just wrote out 10 pages documenting patterns and themes. So I was thinking about it, and there's a lot of dynamics playing into this, and I even talked to my boyfriend about it, and he knows someone who is no longer obviously with us that committed suicide because of similar themes that are going on right now. And I looked back, and I had the exact time frame of when that transpired, and Jupiter was in Libra, and it was retrograde. There was a T-square going on between Black Moon and Lilith, and two mutable signs, so Saturn and Pluto specifically. The correlating, themes or common denominators are both events, or both time frames, had instability within the generational influences for the aspects, meaning the scene or the atmosphere that it was set is naturally unstable. Secondly, there was a distinctive square between Jupiter and Pluto. I'm just gonna start reading off here. This Pisces Mercury thing is kicking my ass right now. I'm having problems with details. Anyway, I'm just gonna start reading off my papers. I mean, yeah, okay. So I'll kind of go over. I'm not gonna pain myself by pulling up the actual articles of the stories. If anybody wants me to link them, or they can go on my Facebook page, or I can elaborate on it maybe later. But there's just way too many details going on right now, and I shorthanded the events and put them in chronological order. So on the well, first off, wait. I want to point out something interesting. So these suicides or whatever, suicides and murders and anything, self-destructive kind of stuff, started more or less like the last week of January. On the 6th of February, Jupiter went retrograde. So it's in Libra, obviously, and the polarity theory works across the board for everything, meaning that if there's any malefic or negative repercussions of a particular planet or sign, the planet that's in a certain sign, the challenges or the negative repercussions will surface in a polarity. So I wrote down Jupiter in Libra going retrograde on the 6th of February would be involved with the self, which is the first house, self and life, and then also is associated with Mars. So then on the 10th of February, so 4 days later, we had that lunar eclipse in Leo that was in the first house, and it was sharing the first house partially with the North Node. The polarity of that is obviously Uranus, and that would constitute as abnormalities. Then on the 13th of February, just 3 days later, we had Black Moon Lilith go into Sagittarius, and instantly, as soon as it did that, it started squaring the North and South Node. And Lilith was in the 4th house at this moment, which is of the home, domestics, and family. And the North Node was in the 1st house, and the South Node was in the 7th house. So the 1st house is self, the 7th house is others, or relations with others. Then we had the Pisces solar eclipse the other day. That was also conjunct that huge stellium that was in Pisces, but it was definitely conjunct the South Node, Chiron, and the Sun. And so I highlighted the South Node because the nodes are obviously playing a key role in this, or as a factor, with the Lilith T-square. So, and then the day before, actually, of this eclipse, that's when the Venus-Mars conjunction that was in the quadrant of the Sun, the Self, meaning that it would be some sort of combative associations with one individual to another. And also, this is around the time frame when Eris and Uranus were exact, which would be a psychopathic signature. So, and at some point throughout this time between the 24th of February to now, there was even all of these planets, Mars, Venus, Uranus, and Eris, all conjunct in a stellium. Okay. Opposition, this retrograde in Jupiter. So keep that in mind. I also like to highlight too, last fall there was a nasty aspect between Venus and Pluto. Venus obviously representing your bonds or relationships with other people or your significant other to an extent. And Pluto obviously having to do with power struggles, death, endings, transformation, loss. So from my own personal experience, I was dating a Leo last year, and he's not the only Leo that got dumped or broke their relationship up. And I'm not trying to project my own personal experience per se, but when I was just listening to my Leo lunar eclipse video, hold on, I'm just going to play this itty bitty part. The Moon in Leo in the 1st house is going to emphasize on self-interest at the expense of others. There we go. That was all I wanted. The Pisces solar eclipse that just happened it landed in the 7th house of others, conjunct the South Node. So we have Leo and Pisces going heads with each other in this fashion. The 14th of February, Valentine's Day, Mars Day, a 23-year-old man barged into a stranger's apartment. So he just randomly knocked on some stranger's apartment door and asked if there was a balcony. And when they said yes, the guy pushed himself through of this old person that lives there, and then went and threw himself off the balcony. And there was the sun, the nodes, and the death aspect. That's a midpoint between the 8th house and Saturn, squaring Lilith and Sagittarius. Then we look at the 14th again. A murder-suicide in the home. Man killed his girlfriend and her mother. There was the sun, obviously, nodes squaring Lilith and Sagittarius. So remember how Lilith was in the 4th house of home or family. And then the 16th, Mercury Day, suicide by hanging in apartment. It was a woman, 40 years old, and she, basically the aspects at play was the T-square with Lilith and the nodes and the sun, and then that's when the Mars-Uranus conjunction showed up. So, was more of just random erratic motivations. And then we look at the 23rd of February, which was Jupiter's Day. Woman, 43 years old, commits suicide by driving off a cliff in California. Her boyfriend, hours later, tried to do the same thing in the same place. The sun and then the nodes squaring Lilith and Sagittarius, and then we have the Mars-Uranus conjunction, and then we have the moon sextiling Lilith. If Lilith is ever sextiling or trining anything, it means that she's making headway with whatever she's trying to do. We are concluding, or I guess I'm concluding, Lilith in Sagittarius is going to murder people. The 24th, which is Venus Day, a house fire that resulted in a death was determined to be suicide. And there was a square with Lilith and Sagittarius to Mercury, the sun, and the nodes. And then we had the Mars-Uranus conjunction. Then the 25th of February was Saturn Day. A man jumped from a condo balcony. It was actually, I guess, the neighbor of, like, Judge Judy or something. And we had Lilith and Sagittarius squaring Mercury, the sun, as well as the nodes. And we again had that Mars-Uranus conjunction. Then we look at the 27th of February. That was Monday, Moon Day. Suicide attempt in a jail in Olympia, Washington. We had Mercury squaring Lilith and Sagittarius and also squaring the nodes. And then we had Lilith trine the death aspect. And then Mars and Uranus conjunct together. I'll tell you what all those aspects mean once I get through the list. Okay, so on the 28th of February, Mars Day, that was yesterday, domestic, or it was actually a politician, commits suicide in office after, and then it was found out that I guess he was having family problems. So there was the square with Lilith and Sagittarius to the nodes as well as Mercury. And then we had the Mars-Uranus conjunction. And then we had that moon trine Lilith again. And yeah. And then on the 27th, Moon Day, a woman killed her husband because the casserole for dinner was burnt. So there's Lilith and Sagittarius squaring the nodes and Mercury again. And then we have the Mars-Uranus conjunction. And then we have, this is where Mars square Pluto showed up into this. And that's concerning. And then we also have Lilith trine the death aspect. And then the 28th, which was Mars Day, a man shot ex-wife and granddaughter in their home. We had the Lilith Sagittarius square to the nodes and Mercury. We had a trine between the moon and Lilith. And then we had, again, the Mars-Uranus conjunction, and then the Mars square Pluto. So when I keep seeing Lilith like trining the moon, it makes me think of The Shining. I'm not trying to like make a joke out of this, but how the husband goes stir crazy and then is influenced to kill his family, the wife and kid or whatever. That's how I'm translating this, and I think that that's the easiest metaphor for me to get across people. So when you see Black Moon Lilith trining trining with the moon, it's like the Shining story. And you have to figure out who Lilith is, I guess. So, let's see. The Mars square Pluto is using brutality to control or fight the change occurring, because Pluto is supposed to be a change. And then Lilith in Sagittarius is the serial killer persona. Trine the moon would be family, spouse, or partner. So that equates to person's irrational feelings encouraging one to commit murder or etc. or suicide or destructive behavior on other people. And then Mars conjunct Uranus, antisocial, psychotic, erratic actions and behavior that is traumatic and or dangerous. And then Lilith Sagittarius square Mercury, convincing the thoughts of destruction. So that's Lilith whispering in your ear, the devil made me do it kind of thing. And then obviously Lilith and Sagittarius squaring the Sun, encouraging self to act out on said thoughts. And then Lilith square the nodes. For the north node, because of where it's placed, represents self, and the south node represents others. So it's encouraging divisions and separation by eliminating others, weighing down the self. So that was, again, why I emphasized on that Leo eclipse comment I made. Then there's a Venus-Mars conjunction that started on the 25th, which causes combative relations. I already told you that. And then I thought of the Mars square Pluto. Pluto is obviously in Capricorn. So the polarity is where the symptoms would manifest, or some sort of signs of problems, right? Problems would equate to murder at this point. So the polarity of the 10th house, which is the ruler of Capricorn, essentially, would be the 4th house of home, aka the moon, the family. So Lilith having those trines with the moon would equate to her killing what the moon represents, which would be family, or home, or, spouse in particular. Venus is associated with, like, love interest or lust, but the moon is supposed to represent your spouse. And then from the 25th of February, and then it ends on the 15th of February, by the way, or 15th of March, sorry, the Mars-Uranus-Eris conjunction. Yeah. So a Sun-South Node conjunction. Personality conflicts, self-failing to adapt to change, and needs a constructive, self-fulfilling life or purpose. The Moon square the South Node. Emotional difficulties associated with the home, family, and lack of adaptability. Neptune and South Node conjunction. Antisocial, self-destructive behavior, disappointments in relationships. And then Mars square Pluto, problems in behavior, attraction to dangerous situations, urge to force capacity for urge to use force and capacity for violence. And then Uranus square Pluto, compulsive, subversive, impatient attitude, lack of emotional security, creating emotional difficulties that are overwhelming. Then the Moon-Sun conjunct in Pisces, which would be the solar eclipse. Emotional impulsiveness, one-track minded, carelessness, and hypersensitivity. Then Mars-Uranus conjunction, restless energy, impulses to act, rash tendencies, violent expression, or actions, mental adversity, and erratic. Okay, maybe that was the end of it. Sorry. I have so many notes here. I was looking at some of the generational things. Uranus-Pluto square, which has been going on for a long time now, obviously, essentially set the stage for instability, clearly. 2015 to present has been the mutable year manifestation, meaning that Saturn, which represents consistency, structure, tradition, is unstable. Back in 2002, when the other example of similar events was transpired, Saturn was also in Gemini. So again, taking on the mode of mutable, making everything unstable. And Saturn in Sagittarius, would essentially, that rules the 10th house, would be losing control of their life, And then the nodes being retrograde, because they've been retrograde this entire time, is reflecting on past traumas and uncertainty of the future. And then Lilith in Sagittarius would be ruler of the ninth house, which is of the mind, distorting perception of the north and south node polarity symptoms. So the north node is self, and the south node is others. And then Lilith in Sagittarius in the ninth would be erratic, destructive ideation behavior within neighborhoods, homes, communities, or with traveling, communications, news, and social media outlets. So, the makes me feel like I'm contributing to this. People, the news perpetuating all these deaths and stuff. Like, I find it interesting that the only reason why it was so easy for me to find all these suicide things is because for whatever reason, and I don't know, if they're actually affiliated with some sort of official publisher for news or whatever, but there was, like, the New York Post, I think, is where I got most of them from. If you go click on that, it's just a list of suicides just put together. They just made it either convenient for you to find them all, and or they intentionally inputted them all right there. And then I also noticed when I was kind of, searching for more suicide events, that there's all these random, scare tactic statistics talking about the numbers in suicides and stuff, and I was like, I don't know. I automatically would assume that they know that they're perpetuating fear, and that they're influencing other people that secretly feel unstable themselves and haven't come out and asked, for help or talked to anybody about it. That it's okay to kill themselves, and or they're desensitizing people to doing it, so people start to accept it as a sane way to get rid of your problems. But we all know that I'm hardcore into the psychological thing, so I don't know. And then, obviously, Mars conjunct Uranus, erratic, abnormal, psychopathic behavior or actions. So then, you already listed that part off. God damn. I'm gonna pause this for a second. Anyway, sorry this is taking me so fucking long. This Pisces Mercury thing is really kicking my ass with details. Like, I understood that's what it meant, but now I've really experienced the transit in full force, and it is the most annoying fucking thing ever. I had to rewrite in my notes so many times. Anyway, so, what people are wanting to know, or I would want to know, I guess, is when this shit's gonna end. Granted, I can't guarantee for sure that I know exactly when it'll end, because we all know how aspects work. It's, we ease into things and we ease out of things. So, but in theory, at least on the 17th of March, I know that that's going to be, 16 days from now, the Mars-Uranus-Eris conjunction, stellium, I guess, will end because Mars will fall out of orb away from Eris and Uranus. Although Eris and Uranus are going to continue to still be within orb of a conjunction, which is still the psychopathic signature that we should be concerned about. And then also the Lilith, Black Moon Lilith, with the T-square with the nodes, which is essentially part of the triggering aspect with, like, the lunar and then the solar eclipse with the nodes, is going to end on April 9th. Yeah, so we've got a whole other month of this. So, in theory, the eclipses, yes, did activate the node division. But Lilith is essentially the catalyst dividing things. So, there's going to continue to be, like, sort of a war, or more or less, between the self, the north node, and the others, the south node. Until then. It could even, because this happened on the eclipse, because eclipse energies can last up to 6 months or more. In theory, even when this aspect pattern is no longer happening, it could still spark residual kind of themes, unfortunately. But we're going to hope that it ends. And then highlighted concerns. is the Jupiter in Libra retrograde, which was again in that other example that happened, over 10 years ago, squaring Pluto in Capricorn would be the end of Libra associations. So Libra is associated with Venus, which is, self-explanatory, relationships, bonding, and then it has to do with the seventh house, which is others and marriage and commitments, and then others in general. So essentially Pluto obviously killing off or severing ties. And I only mention that because on the 4th of March, Venus is going to go retrograde. And if the same kind of theory I'm thinking of works with Jupiter when it goes retrograde as it does with Venus, because they're both benefics, and or because Venus was part of that conjunction with Mars, and then essentially at some point with Eris and Eris and Uranus, which was causing some of these psychopathic signatures and behavior, it's going to go retrograde, and it's going to go right back into a conjunction with Uranus and Eris. And also, if the retrograde thing did actually trigger, essentially, people realizing that it's past the point of no return and obviously not thinking clearly, then Venus could work in the same fashion as the other retrograde planets involved. So it'll go all the way in. Venus will continue to go all the way back until it conjuncts with Chiron, which is concerning too, because there's going to be a grand trine on the 8th of March with the moon conjunct Lilith, and then trine the ascendant. I remember when I told you about trines with Lilith, and then trine Chiron. And obviously the moon will be squaring Uranus and Eris conjunction. So the fact that Lilith is trining the ascendant, I don't really and then obviously Uranus and Eris are involved. There's no possible way that can translate anything else besides death or some sort of severe injury. And so March 7th, a cardinal grand cross will happen with Uranus and Eris conjunction, square Pluto, square the moon, square Jupiter retrograde. And then other aspects that are playing into that at the same time would be the moon semi-square Lilith, and then the moon squaring Venus retrograde. So, in theory, in a perfect world, I would love to think that once we're out of this huge Pisces theme, that people's logic and reason will kind of come back. But I think that I'm being a bit optimistic for that. And obviously, since the theory holds true that Lilith in Sagittarius is the signature for psychopathy or, committing murder or whatever, harming other people, as long as Lilith is in Sagittarius, that would be a theme. So, and that coincides with, some of my theories about the rise of psychopathy in societies and all that stuff. So, I'm just hoping that people aren't subjected to unsafe environments in their home, because that's really bad. I would just suggest, if you happen to be somebody who knows of a scenario where there's some sort of tension or violence going on, that you do the right thing and you essentially get authorities involved and or do everything you can to separate the two. It would be so much better if a couple that was having volatile, relations, just one of them just fucking move out for 6 months, and then if they, in theory, worked it out later, that would be better than just sticking it out and letting it stew and letting it turn into one of these things, because that's exactly what it is. I conclude that a lot of the tension that was caused, not only from the instability and stress responses, but any lingering resentment or conflicts within relations, close relations with people, where either the self is being feels like it's being burdened with its responsibilities and obligations with its family or whatever, and or the nasty aspect between Venus and Pluto last year, people that decide to, that were in toxic self-destructive, or toxic destructive relationships didn't get out of them, and now it's past the point of no return. They're going to cause death or severe injury to each other, or vice versa, or whatever. So that it ends, at least in mid-April. I kind of was getting ahead of myself and looking at, seeing as, thinking about the mutable thing. The Gemini is going to be the next season after Taurus, and the scary idea that, when major planets go into Gemini and they're in opposition with Lilith and Sagittarius, I think this is just going to start up all over again. But I think that, like, the psychopathic motives or intentions of, destructive and malicious intent will be redirected at another facet, I guess. Like, for example, Gemini would be more associated with siblings or, friends or associates, as opposed to this moon association, which is the polarity of, the 10th house, Capricorn house, it being the home, and Lilith being in a home. So, yeah.